Welcome back, guys. Welcome back, gals. Welcome back, non binary pals. Welcome back, storytellers. My name is Max. This is the Storytellers Guild, and I am continuing my journey of Let's Write, where we make our way through a story so you can see sort of behind the curtain of the creative process, and I can help sort of showcase that writing isn't necessarily that mysterious. I think there's a lot of mystique around it, waiting for inspiration and all of those things. And there doesn't have to be. You can just sit down and write something because you're excited to or because you want to. So the goal is to take a little bit of the fear out of it just by showing you my process so you can get an under the hood look. I'm not very good with cars. I don't know why I chose to use that metaphor. So up here, I will say I went through last time and wrote quite a bit actually. So I will sort of zoom out for a second here. I suppose I should sit down at the desk, shouldn't we? Let's get to writing. So, as always, we're doing the most important thing. We've sat down to write. And I'll give you this now. I'll sort of slowly scroll through this so you can pause it if you need to, so you can sort of go over what's happened. And now that you have, we can continue. So, obviously, the commander has some stuff going on. And I don't think she's going to be too open about it this time. I think we're going to have to get into that later. But for now, we're going to move forward with the detective's questions because he has some stuff to do. That's a strong statement. Said detective. Is the control V still there? No. Detective Duncan. Said detective Watercolour. So again, to save time, I'm going to go through and highlight this so we can copy paste over and over again. Nodded. Seriously. Hold up in court either. They looked at her. She went back to jotting down her notes. And this is just like she wants to contribute, and I think she's not necessarily making a joke. She's just like trying to engage in a slightly playful way. Not even playful. It could be read one of two ways, which I guess is fun. Um, she could be being playful here, or she could be being very serious and stoic and taking herself too seriously. Both of which I think could be interesting angles to take for the rookie officer. I think both of those are compelling in different ways, and so we'll sort of live into which one sounds more fun, right? Um, so let's see. Outside of everyone, uh, the question again, milady. The question again, Commander, said Detective Watercolor. Only this time, perhaps we could be a little less fatalistic in our answer? With a sigh. So I imagine. So I'm having the question. He's trying to engage her. She's rebuffing him. He's trying to engage her again, and she's not angry at him. He can tell. He's just like trying to get the information he needs. And a lot of times that's what it is. Even if the person isn't guilty in the situation, it's about overcoming the person who is the barrier, right? Either you upset them socially or you upset them rationally or emotionally or something, and so you have to kind of work through that as well. So he's trying to do that. um, with a sigh. Um, so I started to say with that sentence, I started to say the commander sighed and turned around. But I glanced back up as I did that. I don't know if you saw. My eyes ran up the first few sentences. And if you're not careful, you can do the person did this, said some words. The person did this, said some words. And you're um, your conversations can get a little stilted, right? They can start to feel a little samey. And I don't want that to be the case. I want this to feel dynamic. And more importantly, I want his acknowledgement of her frustration to kind of turn a corner a little bit. So this is going to be her actually now coming into this conversation instead of doing it because it's her duty, doing it because she wants the crime solved or because she wants to help the Duke. I'm not sure yet. We'll find out. The Commander, what's her name? Faircourt. There it is, right at the top of the page. I'm always bad at remembering when I don't do this every day. Commander Faircourt, turn back to him. Fatalism is... Life is literally fatalism, she said, waving away his objection. But I understand what you mean. Even if we are all going to die, we can't let the whole thing go to pot. In the meantime, can we? Detective Watercolour smiled sympathetically. Like, I just imagine her being like, we can't let the whole thing go to pot, can we? And he just goes like, sure. Just answer the question, please. Like, like there's that meme online, like, man, this is a Wendy's. You know, like, don't unload. I'm not your therapist. Please just answer the question so I can do my job. No, she said at last. She said, after giving it some thought. No, she would have given it thought before. I don't think it was anyone in the Duke's employ. How do you know? Said Duncan Watercolour. And see, we get to go down a whole new page. It's so exciting. No, I don't think it was anyone in the Duke's employ. How could you know? I was here late that night, overseeing the Duke's newest financial... And I don't know what this is. Like, she's doing something. She was here, and so I'm thinking back, and like in my brain, it's kind of like a fade out to like the past, right? It's like I was here that night, and then it sort of fades into her that night as the memory, and what's she doing, and why was she there, and is it more fun? I was gonna say what she was doing, but then it's more fun to add to the mystery and to make it sort of a more tangled web for the detective to have to uncover. So I think I'm gonna say overseeing the Duke's newest, because I don't want to be specific about it because she's trying to protect his financial interests as well as his mental health, right? So, or his property and safety, not his mental health. Sorry, I said therapist earlier, and that was just floating around in my brain. Overseeing the Duke's newest financial efforts. He's always had a head for business. That man. I'm lucky to serve him. Are you not in his employ? Asked. Detective Watercolour scowled. Alright, so we can just scowled. Are you not in his own imp? Are you? And italics are always fun. Are you not in his employ? frowned, not scowled. No, she said. His Grace saved me from an unfortunate social situation. I owe him my station. I owe him my station and nearly my life. And may I ask what it was? May I ask what happened? And this is one of the ways that Detective Watercolor is going to differentiate himself from sort of other detectives. Is he's not just gonna like strong arm his way into things or try to outmaneuver people intellectually. He's just gonna like relate, and like respect boundaries and stuff, and just be like a healthy human being. Obviously, the law is different, and we'll get to that because you saw that he was pretty flippant about that. And I think that internal tension, as I'm saying it out loud, is part of what's going to make him fun. Is when it comes to people, he doesn't cut corners, but when it comes to the law, he does. So we'll have to explore that and talk about why, and eventually there will be a download session after this series of interviews. So let's continue. They saved us from an unfortunate. I owe him my station and nearly my life. May I ask what happened? You may, said Faircourt. I need not answer. I may choose not to answer. But I choose. You may. I choose not to answer. Not. And I'm just sounding it out, like thinking about this out loud. And it's kind of weird to watch happening in real life, I guess, in real time, I suppose. But it's valuable and important. So, you may. I choose not to answer. We are all entitled to our privacy. Agreed, Detective Watercolor. Quinn glanced up at him. He smiled back at her. Every night before I leave, I see, continued, explained, continued. So this would be a fun section. I'm sitting here staring at this and going quiet for a second. So this is an interaction where it would be fun to be in one person's head or the other. So I think maybe this is the decision that we have to decide whose head we're in, maybe? Or maybe we're just going omniscient. We'll see. I'm not sold yet on one or the other because I think both have their ups and downs, and I don't want to commit. So the easier thing to do is not and just keep going with the story, and eventually we can get some fun interaction. Like I'll just show you an example, right? If Quinn, we could say, Quinn glanced up at him. He smiled back at her. If Quinn, we could say, for all his personal skills, his interpersonal skills, and fame, and for all his interpersonal skills and status and popularity, Detective Watercolor was absolutely aggravating in his singular paradox, in his singular paradox, like because he can both like, right? So anyway, that's one. And then if we are in Detective Watercolor, we could say he smiled back at her. He knew She was eager to understand more subtle aspects of detective work. But just as the interview was no time for notes, it was no time for explanations either. And obviously, one of the things I try to do is not have very long sentences. I am getting kind of wordy in this story, and I did a very good job in my other book that I recently published online. I'm not doing that. So you saw me insert that period there. But you can see here, there's an example, like, all of this is potential, right? Like, both of these things could be there. And so what I'll do here is I'll just insert a little bracket, and we can come back to that, right? Because obviously this is not the final version. And that's the beauty of the first draft of everything, is that it's no one has to see your first draft if you don't want them to. So, continuing on. Every night before I leave, continued Faircourt, I check to ensure the staff are all in their rooms. That night, everyone was accounted for. Could they not have gotten up after you left? Asked the detective. And I've been saying Detective Watercolour too much. I've been saying the Commander too much. So I'm trying to mix it up a little bit, just so the titles don't feel stale. Right? You don't want this to just be a litany of their titles. You want this to be an interaction between humans. So it's important not to get caught up in the not to be too samey, not to be too redundant. You know, you don't want this to become monotonous for people. You don't want it to be a chore. You left? Decidedly not. The staff are locked in their rooms after hours. Barbaric, muttered Quinn. Detective Watercolour scowled at her. Gave her a warning glance. Sorry, Commander. Sorry, milady. No need to be sorry, said Faircourt. Said the Commander. And the juxtaposition here. So I choose the Commander instead of Faircourt in this interaction because she's also about to say, and no need for lady. I gave up the sound dampening towel was in the way of the screen. I gave up my holdings when I assumed my position here. And I agree. It is barbaric. Are they not? Detective Watercolour chewed his lip. So I want a little. This is dark. This is getting a little bit heavy and intense. So I want to make sure that this is still lighthearted and fun. So I'm gonna say, like, chewed his lip. How do they use the privy? Right, restrooms. And she's going to say they have chamber pots. Oh. Watercolor shivered. That is barbaric. A strong counterpoint to his wages offered. So this is going to be kind of like, and I realized when I was writing about like the Duke and about the different tiers, there's going to be some classism elements in here and like explorations of like privilege and wealth and money and accomplishment and like how all those things factor in together, especially when you're trying to protect people from each other. So that's going to be a tone of this for sure. The Commodore shrugged. Commander. Commander shrugged. How are we on time? 21 minutes. We're doing good. I try not to keep these over 30 anymore. I wanted to keep them to 15 originally, and that's just not realistic because like you can see, like even as you start to get into it, you build up a head of steam. It does tend to snowball, and there's definitely a point where you're really plugging right along. And I want to make sure that while that's happening, I don't sort of cut it too short because I want you to have a sense of being in that space as well. And that's part of the joy of sitting down to actually write intentionally is you don't always have to have inspiration or wait for inspiration. You can just start going and eventually it gets better. You get excited about it. His are the best in the district. And here you see like another source of potential motivation, right? It's like if it wasn't his employees, maybe it was a jealous lord who thinks he's paying his employees too much. And I say employees, they really are servants, and we're going to talk about that language in the book, so I don't want you to feel like I'm hand waving away the fact that he has servants. We're going to get there in this story for sure, but not in this interaction. So all the more reason someone might want him to lose a little. All the reason, asked the detective. Perhaps. Vercourt. I had thought about it myself, to be sure. I'd thought about it myself, to be sure. He does have a great enemies in the area. Not enemies. Enemies is too strong. A great many conflicts. A great many challengers? Foils. Let's go with foils for now. In the rise. In the quarter. And across the city, for that matter. And you, Commander? Asked Detective Watercolour. I know it's rude, but I have to know. And I know it's rude. I beg your pardon. But I have to, and he's trying to ingratiate himself here, right? And maybe someone like her wouldn't see it, but other people will, right? And so it's important to recognize that he's not all that. He's not as slick as he thinks he is. He's not perfect, right? He's very much not perfect. And we'll run up against people who know that. But I have to know if you have a an alibi. You have. Do you have an alibi for that night? Commander Faircourt. And turned back to the window. I do not. She turned back to the window. She picked up a small handbell and rang it. Then she turned, and that's kind of like she's shutting down again, right? Like the walls are going back up. Reappearing. Her usual delighted grin. Please see our guests out. I have other work that needs to be done. She's just like trying to find an excuse to get rid of them because it's hard for her, right? Excuse me. Quick curtsy. She took Detective Watercolour by the arm and led him out the door. And this is a part where if it was from his perspective, I'd say she had, she had surprising strength. It was amazing how strong she was. Something like that. Something a little bit more playful, because this was kind of an intense scene. And we do need to make sure that this is still playful. What was taken? Called. He's like just being sort of hurried out. He asked over his shoulder. An old. And I need to go back up now, so you're seeing this live in real time. I don't want to edit this out. I have to decide if they were told that what was taken first. I know. Oh, I didn't mention it, so that's important. So I'm going to write it in here. All that was left. What was left was a locket that belonged to her. Haha! The name of the story. All that was left was a locket that belonged to her. Agreed. Duncan. No, Hancock. Excuse me. Said Hancock. No real value. Other than no real value to it. Or so they say. So this locket is all. This locket was all he had left of her. Okay, good. So we know what it is. So instead, they're gonna be run out. Quinn followed. She put her notepad back in her pocket. Jacket pocket. And turned back to the commander. Imperious woman aired out over the city. Perhaps this is a chance for me to make a perhaps at the goals what's the word I'm looking for? A chance for me to do shorter sentences instead of one really long one, which I tend to like to do. Perhaps at the goals, wheeling over the city. Perhaps at some distant memory. Perhaps at nothing. Help your case. Doesn't help your case much, said Quinn. Wondered aloud. Us. Just like that. To get rid of us like this. To dismiss us. To dismiss like this. Aren't you worried? What we'll find out? You worried about what we'll find out? Or are you worried? We'll discover. My dear, said. Sorry, there's an ambulance going by outside. I was like, what is that alarm? I'm wrapping up the scene here, so I'm trying to knock that out in this episode. Eric Court, without turning around. I'm looking forward to it. Good day. The interview was over. So we'll leave it there for today. I have more that I want to do. We'll do a sort of summary of this sequence. The next scene, I think, is going to be Watercolour and Quinn sort of debriefing each other on the meeting, and we're going to see some insights that Watercolour has that Quinn didn't, and Quinn's going to have the chance to provide some context too, because she stuck around long enough to get that one little extra sentence, which might make the difference. We don't know yet, but we will find out next time on the next episode of Let's Write. Thank you so much for joining me this time. If you made it to the end, I really appreciate it. It makes a difference. If you like what you see, don't forget to like and subscribe. and we'll see you for the next one. Take care, storytellers. Bye.